No, look, I'm sorry if you were looking forward to this video, you saw the title and maybe thought that everybody was wrong. Everybody in the community got the take on this servant incorrect, and Gareth was actually a phenomenal diamond in the rough. No, that's not even remotely true. Her kit is filled with so many issues that I have no idea where to begin, and it's frustrating for two reasons. Firstly, if you're a fan of Gareth, you finally got your special summer version, and she's just not even remotely good. She struggles to find usage in really any content at all. You can't use her to farm. She's not particularly good in advanced quests. She's not particularly good in challenge quests. She's not a good boss killer. There's just really nowhere to use her. But two, the other reason this is really frustrating is that this could have filled the slot of any other summer unit. We've been waiting for Ereshkigal for years. Ever since year 2, we have been waiting for a summer version of Ereshkigal. We got Ishtar. We're still just holding our hands out, waiting for where she's at. And instead of getting that, they throw this out there. And I am convinced, as many mobile gaming companies do have multiple teams that work on units to make sure that they get them out in a timely manner, I am convinced that whoever the B team is over at DW, Lisengo, whatever you want to call them, they're the ones that made this unit, and they should never be allowed to cook again. But in order for you to understand how bad this unit actually is, we got to do a full breakdown on Saber Gareth. So strap in, get comfortable. If you enjoy these style of videos, I would appreciate a like, maybe a subscription, although this is going to be a bit more of a negative video. I promise this is not usually my forte. I'm usually a much more positive person. But on that note, let's start diving into her kit, starting off with her hits. And there are already issues present when you're just looking at the hits. Why is a year 7 servant, a current servant releasing right now in 2022, I guess technically when she dropped over in the JP side of things, releasing with year 1 hits? Sure, she has really high NP gain. 0.82% is not bad, but not when you're rocking 2 hits on your arts cards. And you may be a newer player wondering, well, ZTL, doesn't it just kind of balance out between the higher NP gain and the lower hits? And to that, all you have to do is look at somebody like Masashi with her skill up, where she doubles her hits and can practically refund her entire NP, or someone like Ereshkigal, who has a very powerful individual arts card that can refund, well, all of her NP back. The NP gain is really nothing if you do not have the hits to back it up, because you gain NP gain, the refund on each individual hit. That's how NPs work, right? That's why you want really, really high hit NPs, not just for the overkill, but so you can get all that NP refund, essentially. That is a really watered down version of it, but it's the whole reason that even at a base fundamental level, even looking at her hits, the most core thing a servant can have, she's already struggling in that department. And they're not gonna win me over with the extra attack. I know they gave it the 5 hits, but that is not good enough. And then we start diving into her skills. Skill 1 is deceptively bad. It's only bad on Gareth. Now, I know she's getting a 20% arts and buster buff for 3 turns and bombing 20 stars on a 5-turn cooldown. In and of itself, this is not a bad skill. You slap this on anybody else and they would love to have this, but unfortunately, as we just outlined, Saber Gareth's arts cards are not very good, so I don't know why they slapped a 20% arts buff on her like it was going to fix the NP gain problems. It's like slapping a band-aid on a 3rd degree burn victim. I mean, the thought and everything is very nice, but in actuality, it's not quite doing what you would want. And I know that this buster buff is going to become a 50% one in conjunction with her 3rd skill, but you can give people the largest buffs you want if they have literally no attack, as Gareth, even after foe investment, is only at 9.1 thousand. It's not really going to matter. And the 20 stars, you would think at the very least, okay, she has access to immediate stars. That's going to be very powerful, but as we look more into her kit, she doesn't have a way to take advantage of these stars, which is super unfortunate. The best use case you're getting out of the stars that she produces is maybe doing some arts crits to refund her NP a little bit. It is a crying shame how pretty much nothing on the 1st skill actually does much for Gareth. It pretty much brings her up to a baseline level instead of making her kit even better. Now, thankfully, the 2nd skill over here is actually pretty good. Not only is it a 3k guts that lasts for 3 turns, it's targetable, and it also gives whoever you target this on 10 stars per turn for 3 turns, and it also gives her the sunlight battlefield buff for 3 turns, which is very good for her own NP. It also means that you don't lose the ability of getting the sunlight battlefield buff for the overcharge of her NP while giving this to somebody else. So it can be very nice that, say your support Merlin or your Koyenskaya is about to go down, Gareth can play doctor with them and give them a gut, as well as give them the regenerating star buff, so even if she goes down, they still keep the stars as well for the next person that comes in. This skill is is actually very, very strong and is a breath of fresh air after the first skill kinda does nothing for Gareth, the second skill kind of does everything for her. It is immensely powerful and at least kinda gives her a niche as a DPS that can also keep your guys alive and give them a little bit of utility with the star regenning. But all that goodwill is almost thrown out the bin when we start looking at the third skill over here. And yes, here is the aforementioned other 30% buster buff. So with her first and third skill up, she has a big, mega 50% buster mana burst, but you're going to be noticing something. That one, she basically has no attack, so she's not doing a lot of NP damage, but if you're looking around and you're wondering, hey, this is a buster servant, right? Where are the crit damage buffs? Where is my ability to take advantage of all the stars that I'm producing? Because 20 immediately and 10 every single turn, that's not bad, especially if you do use her with Merlin, who also makes, 5+ stars every single turn, depending on his own overcharge levels. Plus, you have stuff like 20, 30 that are in the game that if you have that, that is 8 to 10 stars per turn if you have it max limit broken or not, obviously, but you just have no way to take advantage of that. The 20% battery, I mean, sure, that's fine. She can't do buster looping. I mean, unless you wanted to do something like a Rosh clear wave 1, then you have her 20% battery plus the 70% from Oberon, then you unlock her a pen skill. You don't even have to max it out. That gets you 100%, and then the Koyans guys dump all of their buffs onto her for wave 3. Technically, you can do buster looping, quote unquote, that way, but I don't think that really counts, especially because Arash as the lead really doesn't work when you're going to be using Gareth against the Lancers because she's a Saber, so even the really weird gimmicky strats don't end up working for her, but that's fine. Not everybody has to be a looper, even with the buster meta where realistically you do want everybody to be a looper, but you can find other niches. Look at somebody like Herc or Ku Alter. They aren't able to do any looping at all whatsoever, even though someone like Kentoki can do single target looping. They've at least got a niche of going into CQs and beating people up and being able to survive for a really long time. Unfortunately, Gareth really doesn't have any other niche, and for some reason, the on-attack buff that they gave her wasn't stacking crit damage, wasn't getting an attack buff, it wasn't even genning more stars, which I guess I would have taken. It's doing 300 burn damage for 3 turns whenever you do normal attacks. I don't know who was trying to cook with this, but she has no way to take advantage of this. It's not like, oh, when you attack burned enemies, you get a 50% power mod. There's nothing like that on her kit. And the way things were going, if this was, 10% crit damage every time you normal attack, or maybe 20% crit damage whenever you do a buster attack, or whenever you do a critical hit, something along those lines, she actually could have been a fairly niche unit that it's like, okay, she's not very great, but you can at least get some really good crit damage out of her, right? Think of somebody like the original Canis, who can actually do very good crit damage because she stacks it on her NP. Even though you can't use her as a farmer, if you still want to use Canis because you like her, you can crack her out and do some really nasty crits. The same thing could be said for Zenobia on more of the arts side of things, where she's not the greatest looper. Sure, she can get it done, but really where she starts to shine is, in CQs, where she can do these nasty crits against people as she's stacking these massive critical buffs on her NP. But we just have nothing like that for Saber Gareth. The best thing this does for her is give her a niche in what exactly 2 difficult fights where you have these high damage reduction enemies that have low HP that are basically begging for you to take them out with damage over time. It couldn't really be more obvious, but one of those isn't even always available, so realistically it's one stage that if you're struggling with that, I guess she'll be able to help you out. And it's not as though the NP does her any favors. It's not like this fixes anything because it's pretty generic. It's an AoE 4-hit NP, which means she can't even gen stars with the NP, I guess, so they just gave her the low hits over there as well. That on her overcharge gives her a 10% attack buff for 1 turn, and if she has Sunlight Battlefield, remember that from skill 2? Well, she's getting another 20% attack buff for 1 turn, and thank goodness these both proc first, otherwise it'd be really useless. But riddle me this, Batman, why are these 1-turn buffs? Units like Saber Gareth that have ridiculously low damage usually have some kind of gimmick going for them. Look at somebody like Tamatomo. I know he's a 5-star, but he fits the example here of having really low base damage, but then having a way to ramp up his damage with his 3rd skill, stacking up the NP damage buffs, and also having a power mod, right? These are 2 ways that he can get around having this lower damage because he has ways to make up for it. And I ran the numbers. I'll be showing those to you, somewhere on the screen in, the next couple of seconds or whatever, but I decided to calc out what she would look like if these were both 3-turn buffs and she was essentially allowed to stack this 30% attack buff. Her damage doesn't get bad. I mean, it's not this game-breakingly broken thing, but it still gets to to a respectable level on the third NP that you fire, which I think is the least that you could ask for. And it's not as though she's even encroaching on your 5-star options. I mean, she still does less damage with the 90% theoretical attack buff from stacking 3 NPs than Altera, right? Altera still is out damaging her at NP1. So it's not as though she's even a threat to your summonable 5-star servants. I just do not know what is going on with this servant. They just pretty much messed up everything on this servant. It should have just been a layup hit, but there's just really nothing outside of the second skill that I like on this servant. And I, for the life of me, could not tell you a good stage to use them in because there really isn't a cohesive design on this servant. But let's get into the letter grading and, let's go over some pros and cons. So starting on the pro side, because she does do a few things well. For one, that second skill is supremely powerful. Not only is it good survivability for herself, but it can also be donated to an ally to make sure that they stay alive, and they get the added bonus of being able to gen 10 stars per turn, which is really, really nice. The second thing is that she does, if as small as it may be, have a battery that is, 20%. You meld that within a pen skill, you can get up to a 40% battery technically, and that's not nothing. I mean, knock it if you want for her not being able to be in the Buster meta, but if you are going to use this servant, the 20% battery will be appreciated. And finally, the last thing that she does really well is produce a decent bit of stars. Being able to bomb 20 stars immediately for immediate access to stars, and also being able to produce 10 per turn is going to be a very nice thing that, in conjunction with, say, a 2030 or with Merlin's on the teams or another just support that's able to gen stars as well, will have a decent bit of stars in rotation. But then we have the cons. For one, there's that really, really low attack stat. Even with that theoretical stacking buff that we would have given her on the NP overcharge, she's still, again, not even out damaging NP1 Altera, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but if you're stacking a 90% attack buff and you still can't beat out some of the other Buster AoE Sabers, there is clearly something going wrong. Which leads into my second con. There is no ramping damage, there's no power mod, there is nothing to really build up towards with Saber Gareth. Again, like I mentioned, using Tamatomo as an example, usually these servants that have base low damage have some way to make up for it. They either are a ridiculously good crit damage servant, they either have a really good niche or gimmick that they're able to play into, they ramp up their damage over the course of a few turns, or have a very strong power mod that supplements their weaker NP1 damage. I mean, even look at somebody like Morgan for another example, who has notoriously pretty low NP1 damage, but you put her up against man attribute opponents and she starts to do really well. The third con is no crit damage. The fact that we can produce a decent bit of stars, but we have no way to take advantage of them is an absolute travesty. I know you're going to be commenting down below and say, well, why don't you just use her with Merlin? And yeah, ideally you would be using her with Merlin or Koyenskaya, but if you're going to be using her with Merlin, she's only going to get one turn of those crit damage buffs, and then what do you do after that? Hold your thumbs out and wait for the hero creation to come back up. And then unfortunately for Koyenskaya, this only applies to her Buster crit damage, where she clearly seems to be intended to also do arts crits to refund her NP, and those are going to hit like a wet paper towel. So try as they might, but the supports are really not going to find a diamond in the rough with this one. The fourth and final con is unfortunately that she is not able to be a part of the Buster meta, which I know a lot of people that are longtime players are going to be rolling their eyes, but I'm sorry, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news. This is a gacha game. You are going to be farming a lot of the time. That is going to be 90% of what you're going to be doing. They're all like this, whether they're disguised as a Dragon Ball game, a Bleach game, or even a Horse Girl racing game. They're all going to be having you farm out the wazoo, and having a unit that cannot do the farming because the Buster meta is the harshest one out of the group. Arts, you can take somebody like Nero, who only has one hit on their NP, and you can still kind of drag her across the finish line. Buster is a yes or no question. Do you have the battery to get the job done? If the answer is no, you are not allowed inside the club. And for somebody like Saber Gareth, that is immensely unfortunate, because if you wanted to just still use her because you just happen to really like Gareth, you can't even do that. You're gonna have to do some weird janky setups, which already outlined earlier probably isn't going to work. That if you're gonna use somebody like Arash to try to clear wave 1, he's gonna have to fight Lancers, and that's not going to be very good for him. It's not gonna be a very great time, and you're not gonna bring Gareth neutral to the location. She has no power mod, there's no ramping damage. She's gonna be hitting them for neutral damage and is definitely not taking anybody out. But with these pros and cons in mind, I have no choice but to rank Gareth with a very low D ranking, which for my guys that are outside of the States is a failing grade. I have no idea who made this servant, but that dev team should not be allowed to cook ever again. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, do not make any more of these servants, alright? Pass this off to the better team and maybe we won't have to deal with a travesty like this ever again. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you would be interested in a potential video going over how I would fix Summer Gareth, let me know that in the comment section down below as well. As always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like on the video. It helps me out more than you know, and maybe even a cheeky little subscription if you like these daily FGO videos. But with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.